The desert night was quiet. Only the hum of the city far away could be heard. Inside the marble palace, an Arab billionaire reclined on a velvet couch, his eyes half closed, as if lost in sleep. The golden lamps flickered shadows across the walls, and servants had long since gone to rest. Only one remained, the maid's daughter, who tiptoed barefoot into the grand hall, carrying a tray of dates and water. She thought he was sleeping, her small figure trembling as she set the tray down. Her eyes weren't greedy. They were soft, almost sorrowful. She didn't take the food for herself. Instead, she bent to adjust the blanket that had slipped from his shoulder. Her hands were careful, as though afraid to disturb him. The billionaire's chest tightened. Behind his feigned sleep, he had expected to catch her stealing like so many others had done before. But instead he felt her tuck the edge of the cover with such tenderness that it broke through the fortress of his pride. He wanted to open his eyes, but he waited, his throat burning. Then she whispered. Words meant only for the silence. Thank you for helping my mother. You don't see us, but I see you, and I pray for you every night. Her voice cracked, and in that moment the mighty billionaire, with empires under his name, felt tears sting at the corner of his eyes. He had set a trap to test her, but what he caught instead was a truth that shook him more than any betrayal. The next evening, the palace was alive with music. Guests in jeweled gowns and sharp suits filled the marble halls, laughter echoing off the pillars. The billionaire sat among them, his gaze steady, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't forget the whisper of the maid's daughter, or the way her fingers had trembled when she tucked him in. From the shadows she appeared again, carrying a tray of tea for the guests. Her dress was plain, her head lowered, but there was a calmness about her that pulled his eyes every time she moved. The crowd saw only a servant. He saw the echo of her words. You don't see us, but I see you. When she passed his side, their eyes met for the first time, not by accident, but as if fate had pushed it. Her lips parted in shock, and she nearly dropped the tray, but he caught it, his hand brushing hers for a fleeting second. The weight of that touch lingered heavier than any jewel in the room. The guests laughed at a joke, unaware that their billionaire host was no longer listening. His heart beat like a restless drum. He had built walls taller than his palace, yet a girl with nothing had walked through them, with nothing but kindness. Later, when the hall emptied, he found her alone in the servants' corridor. She bowed quickly, muttering apologies, but he lifted his hand gently, asking her to stop. For the first time he spoke her name softly, almost unsure of his own voice. And in her eyes he saw not fear, not greed, but something rare, something pure. The courtyard was quiet that night. The stars spread wide above the palace like scattered diamonds. The billionaire walked slowly, his thoughts heavy, until he heard the faint sound of humming. It was her sitting by the fountain. Her bare feet dipped into the water, a tray of untouched bread by her side. She didn't see him at first. Her voice, soft, carrying a song he didn't know, but it stilled the air around her. He stepped closer, and she startled. Rising quickly to her feet, her eyes wide with fear. "My lord, I didn't mean—" she whispered. But he shook his head. "Sit," he said, his voice firm, yet strangely gentle. She hesitated, then lowered herself back onto the stone edge, her hands twisting in her lap. He lowered himself beside her, a man who had commanded boardrooms and royal councils, now sitting beside a servant's daughter. She tried to look away, but he asked, Tell me, why did you say those words that night? You said you pray for me every night." Why, her lashes trembled, but she spoke because my mother says even the richest men carry burdens no one can see. And when I saw you alone, I felt you must be tired of carrying them too. So I prayed that God would give you peace." The words cut through him deeper than any blade. He had expected flattery or fear. Instead, she had spoken to the emptiness he thought no one else could. "See," he turned away, hiding the wetness in his eyes, but his shoulders betrayed him. They shook with the weight of tears. He could not stop in that courtyard under the moonlight. The walls he had built began to crumble, and for the first time in years, he allowed someone to see the man behind the wealth, the power, the silence. Days turned into weeks, and the billionaire found himself searching for her in every corner of the palace, no longer to test her, but to feel the strange peace she carried. Her laughter when helping her mother in the kitchens, her soft steps echoing down the halls, even the way she lowered her gaze in respect, all of it haunted him more than gold or power ever had. One evening a storm swept over the desert, lightning flashing against the palace towers. She was carrying baskets across the courtyard when the rain began to pour, her thin dress clinging to her frame. He saw her stumble, and without thinking, he rushed forward, catching her before she fell. She gasped at his touch, and for a long moment they simply stared, the storm roaring around them. "Why do you care for me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I am nothing in your world." He lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You are everything in mine," he said, and his voice shook with the truth he had hidden too long. Tears mixed with the rain on her cheek. She tried to protest, tried to remind him of the walls between their lives, but he silenced her with words that left no room for doubt. "From the moment you touched my blanket with care, I knew my life would never be the same. I wanted to trap you, I wanted to prove you wrong. But instead, you showed me the one thing I never had. Kindness without condition." She pressed her hands to her mouth, unable to hold back the sob rising in her chest. He reached for her hands, lowering them gently, and whispered, "I do not want a servant beside me. I want you as my equal, as my heart, as my future." And in that storm, as thunder cracked and the palace lights flickered, she fell into his arms, not as a maid's daughter, but as the woman who had reached the soul of a billionaire with nothing more than compassion. The desert dawn broke gentle after the storm, its first light painting the palace walls in gold. Scent of wet earth lingered in the air, carrying a stillness that felt almost holy. The billionaire stood at the balcony, his robe loose, his eyes fixed on the horizon, where the sky kissed the endless sand. He heard soft footsteps behind him, and without turning, he whispered, "I wondered if you would come." She stood there hesitating, her hands folded before her. The maid's daughter looked nothing like a servant. Now the glow of morning wrapped her in quiet dignity. He turned at last, his face stripped of arrogance, stripped of disguise. For once he was not the man who owned empires, not the master who tested loyalty. He was simply a man hoping to be chosen. "You should hate me," he said, his voice unsteady. "I pretended sleep. I tried to trap your heart. I thought I could control what cannot be controlled." She shook her head, her dark eyes shimmering with emotion. "You did not trap me," she replied. "You only showed me the truth. A man who hides his pain behind wealth,
and a girl who hides her hope behind.
Silence. We are both more than what the world sees. The words broke something open in him. He crossed the room, took her hands and pressed them against his chest, where his heart beat hard and real. "Then hear this," he said. "I will no longer hide. You are not a servant. You are not a passing kindness. You are the woman I want beside me through every storm." She trembled, her lips parting as tears threatened. When she spoke, it was not with doubt, but with fragile strength. "If I stand by you, it will not be as a shadow, but as your equal." He smiled through the tears in his own eyes, bending to kiss her hands with reverence more precious than crown. And in that room, filled with light and silence, they sealed a bond no contract, no fortune could measure. For all the riches he had once thought defined him, nothing compared to the grace of the girl who had given her last piece of bread to a stray cat and her first piece of love to him. The palace servants whispered of change, the kingdom murmured of scandal, but neither the gossip nor the gold mattered any more. For he had chosen her, and she had chosen him. In the end, love stripped of pride, wealth stripped of power, was the only treasure worth keeping. As the desert sun climbed higher, they walked forward together into a future unknown. Not master and servant, not billionaire and maid's daughter, but two souls who had finally found home in each other. And for those who watched from afar, for those who doubted, let their story be a reminder. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can awaken a love stronger than any empire.